Welcome back to Pod Patrol with your host, Dr. Jeff Dikis. Tonight, I am joined by Dr. Maryellen Brucato. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. We are fresh off the heels of the ACFAS meeting down in Phoenix. Did you have a good time down there?
Yeah, we had an awesome time. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of movements, things like that.
Yeah, so you're heavily involved in ACFAS. For the younger people, that's the American College of Foot and Ankle Surgeons. I'm sure most people know that. But what roles have you taken on in ACFAS, and how do you kind of get started and get your foot in the door?
Great question. So when I was a resident or a newly formed attending, I don't exactly remember, I volunteered to be on the research committee. So I was on the research committee for about 3 or 4 years. And then they rotated me off onto the practice management committee, where I've thrived because I own my own practice and I love practice management. I'm super passionate about it. So now I've been the chair of practice management committee for a couple of years. And I think for any of you that are looking to get involved in ACFAS, start at the ground level, volunteer, and just join a committee, try to get on a committee right away. And then as time goes on, you'll be able to do more and more things. The other thing I did was run for a position in the region that I'm in. So ACFAS is broken up into different regions, and you can run for positions to kind of lead that region. And so I started out as the director of education for 3 years. Then I was secretary treasurer for 3 years. And now I've just got moved up to vice president. So I'm in charge of that. And I do their, arthroscopy course as well. I'm faculty for that. And now I'm teaching and lecturing and doing workshops at the ASC as well.
Awesome. Going back a little bit, you went to Temple for podiatry school and then residency and subsequently in private practice in New Jersey. I was listening to the Dean's Chat episode with you, and I thought that the story of how you came to be in your office with private practice was a very, very interesting story. Are you willing to kind of share that for the people listening to this who did not hear that one?
Sure. Yeah, it's always a fun story. Basically, when I first graduated residency, I got a job in private practice working for a guy, and I was kind of the first doctor that he hired that stayed longer than a couple months. And it was really working out because he was super busy and I was seeing a lot of patients, and he didn't do any rear foot and ankle surgery. So I had a ton of patients just in waiting for reconstructive surgery and things like that. And I was just really busy, and he had owned a couple businesses and kind of slowly stepped away from that practice. And I wound up really running it. And then slowly over time, we hired another doctor, and then we hired another doctor, then we hired another doctor, to the point where we were 5 doctors deep. And I was really running everything except the finances. And then I get a call from the owner's wife at 5 a.m. one morning saying, he had a stroke and it's major. So he was out completely for 6 months, in the hospital and rehab. And so I kind of had to step up and start running the practice completely. I had to cover his shifts, even though he only worked 1.5 days a week. I was the one that had to cover that. And then I started digging into the finances, and the finances were kind of a mess. I was working 6 days a week. And I was just kind of thinking, I can't even give myself a raise here. I really don't want to do this anymore. So I started looking for other jobs, and someone kind of clued him in on that. And then he offered me, do you want to buy into the practice 25%? I'm like, sure. Okay. That sounds really good. Awesome. So I did buy into the practice, and then he came around almost a year later around the office. Started just kind of wandering around and telling people that
How old are you at this point? How many years out of practice?
6 years. I was 6 years in practice. So I was probably 35.
Okay.
Yeah, probably 34, 35. And good question. And so he just kind of started acting really weird. And I was in the middle of opening up a second office for us. And I was really pushing for that because my thought was, the bigger you get, the more offices you add, the more doctors you add, the stronger you're going to be as a business. Sure. And then it kind of all came to a head one day, and in a meeting, And he accused me of trying to steal his practice from him and saying it's a hostile takeover. And I was like, I don't think you understand what the term hostile takeover like means. And
Mhm.
so so we had this kind of big blowout, and I tried to approach him and say, hey, why don't we sit down and have a conversation about this, like, let's talk about this, let's figure it out. And he just really refused to meet with me. I hired lawyers, and my lawyer sent a letter saying the same thing. Hey, like, these are the agreements you have with Dr. Brucato. Like, why are you saying this? And if there's any question, why don't we meet? Like, why don't we meet with your lawyers? And that day he received that letter, I was in the new office I was in the middle of opening, and he immediately called the locksmith and locked me out of my original office. Yeah, it
That's
was crazy.
crazy.
So then
Yeah.
I got into a legal battle with him for like 4 or 5 months, and we wind
Ugh.
up settling. So he kept the old practice and I kept the new practice. And, like, I really couldn't take any patients with me. And I could only take like certain employees with me that were like their names were actually in the settlement agreement. So it was pretty crazy. So to me, I really had to build up the practice from zero, even though some patients did follow me. I was in a different county, so a lot of them didn't. It really wasn't that many. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty crazy. But it was probably at the time, it was the worst thing that could have happened. Like, I was upset every day. I was sitting in my office teaching myself how to do Google ads. It was just like literally insane. Like, vendors wouldn't work with me because he had told them that he wouldn't continue business with them if they did business with me. And it was
Jeez.
just crazy, but it wound up being like the best thing that ever happened to me. Now I have like 2 offices, and I just hired my 4th doctor. I'm in the middle of opening up my 3rd office, and it is like just so awesome. And I'm so happy. So I think it's a good example of like sometimes something really like bad happens to you, and at the time you're just like, oh, this is like awful, like, it's so hard to go on. And then looking back on it, down the road, you may feel that it's actually the best thing.
Yeah, that sounds like an absolute mess, number one. But it also sounds like getting away from that toxic relationship was fantastic. It was probably either going to happen then or a little bit later or a little bit later, but it was going to happen eventually. And so to almost rip the band-aid off and do it all at once might have been better. Although I'm sure at the time it didn't feel like it was better because you do have some sort of salary that you're relying on and patient volumes and to kind of, revert to probably not zero because you said you were opening another office, but almost like kind of starting over a little bit.
Oh yeah.
It's got to be very stressful. So, we'll get back to some of the other things, but we're kind of going down the path of talking about private practice. So let's keep talking about that for a little bit. What drew you to private practice originally?
So when I was in college, I had always been pre-med, and I didn't know about podiatry being an option until my school, Temple, came to my undergrad and did a presentation about how you can do podiatry and you can still do surgery and you can specialize right away. And I was like, oh, I'm really interested in this. So I started shadowing some podiatrists in my hometown, and they were just like the coolest. They would surf during their lunch breaks. They were always happy, always relaxed. They had these like really meaningful, patient relationships, and that was in a private practice setting. So I always, from day one, pictured myself being that doctor in the future,
Mhm.
and that's kind of how it came about.
What do you think are the pros and cons? The biggest pros, the biggest cons to anyone who's maybe in residency or even younger, or anyone out in the world who's looking, well, maybe I'll try that for a change. What are the pros and cons of private practice to you?
Yeah, great. So pros is the flexibility, right? You're your own boss. If you own your own private practice, I guess if you're an associate, it's I don't know. There are still pros for sure, but I'll take it from my side, from an owner side,
Sure.
if
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Um, you're completely flexible with your schedule. If I want to be out the door by 2 p.m. every Thursday because I have to go teach my son's CCD class at 3, it's no problem, because who's going to say no to me? I'm the boss.
Mhm.
Like, I make my
Right.
schedule,
Yeah.
like, so I think being there for my kid whenever I have to be or want to be, like, I'm co-president of the PTA. I'm in the school all the time and I love it. It's so awesome. So I think the flexibility with the schedule, I can go on as many vacations as I want. Obviously, the con to that is that when I'm not in the office, I'm not making as much money. But
Hmm.
that's the importance of hiring other associates and doctors for you. So when you're not in the office, you're still making money. But if
Right.
you're truly by yourself, you're just basically losing money when you're out. So that's definitely a con. Another pro is you get to create your own destiny, meaning, like, for instance, for me, I don't really like to cut nails.
Hmm.
If you like to do that, no problems at all. But my favorite thing is complex cases, second opinions on, surgery, messed up surgery, trauma, things like that. Like, really, the more complex stuff, the better for me.
Hmm.
So I don't want to do the simpler stuff. I want to kind of stick to that. So, and that's what I've always marketed myself as from day one. And that's what my practice is. I don't really cut nails. I don't do stuff I don't want. If I don't like a patient, I don't ever have to see them again because it's my choice. Whereas if you're working for someone, I always felt like the customer is always right. We have to do everything we have to keep the patient happy, even if they're, being ridiculous or they're toxic or they're really straining your staff. So that's another pro. And I think the third major pro is you can make as much money or as little money as you want. So it's like true American capitalism. And I'm a huge patriot. I love the American dream. I love everything about this country. We live in the best country in the world. And the best part about it is if I want to kill it and make a certain amount of money, all I have to do is work more. It's this
Hmm.
very simple formula. So I love that. So if I'm I'm not happy with the income, I just add more hours. I see more patients. I tell them, don't put blocks on my schedule. Everyone's just going to go on a wait today. So you can really dial it. Or conversely, if I'm like, oh, I only want to work 2 days a week and I'm fine with making this amount of money, then I can do that also. So I think those are the major pros. As far as the cons, it's a lot of stress. It's very difficult on your nervous system because of how many
Yeah.
problems come up. The stress, your employee, has some type of drama that you have to deal with. Go through an audit. When you go through an audit as an associate or you work in a hospital, do you really care? Not really. You're not the one that's going to have to pay the money back. But
Right.
as an owner, if the audit goes through and they're successful, then you're going to have to pay all this money back, which definitely stinks. And it's scary because it can be a really high number sometimes. In the other con is you are responsible for everyone there. So if a manager's treating an employee badly, even though you may not have known about it, that's really the liabilities on you. So
Right.
it's definitely like scary. But as you grow as a business owner, that's like really your job. Your job is you become a professional problem solver. There's
Yeah.
always fires coming and you're trying to put them out.
And I'm sure you have to be able to delegate to your office managers. You have to relinquish a little bit of control so that you're not constantly feeling like you're pulled in a million directions, especially if you have multiple offices. You need to be able to rely on good quality staff to say, "Hey, you're in charge here. I'm not going to be here. You need to be the one that's in charge," and delegate that. But I could see why that could be difficult too, because usually the personality that's drawn to private practice is usually type a leader. They want to be, I trust me, so I'm going to get it done. So learning how to delegate is important, but maybe kind of difficult. Do you find it difficult to be able to do that, or you find a way because you have to?
Yeah, I don't have a problem delegating. I love delegating because I don't want to deal with stuff. But for sure, in the beginning, I had trouble with things, or like I would tell a manager to do something or a doctor to do something, and then I never followed up with them, and they never did said thing. So then I kind of got scared about, like, oh my god, I got to follow up with everybody about what they're doing. But at this point, I have a lot of really, really good people in place. Like my CFO is excellent. I have a billing manager, I have a reception manager, I have two office managers, and I have an events manager. So I'm like all about that middle management stuff because if there's like a new medical assistant that can't figure out how to work the ultrasound, like I don't really want to deal with it. I want to have my managers deal with it.
Right. What do you think is the ideal number of years? So you said you answered the question from your perspective, but let's flip it to, you're a young associate. And so when you're an associate, I think it's a good entry level, get your feet wet, build a practice. But most people don't have aspirations of just being an associate forever. They want to kind of do something beyond that, partnership, ownership, whatever it may be. What do you think is the ideal number of years for someone to think about making that transition, or what would be in your mind kind of fair, or how do you work that out?
So that's a really good question. It really is all case dependent, not to give you like a really vague answer. But I think if you're an associate and you're joining a group and your goal is to one day be a partner in that group, first of all, you definitely from day one need to treat the practice like it's your own practice. And I always did that in my old job too. Like, you should be trying to get patients. You should be marketing. You should be out networking. You shouldn't just be relying on the owner to do everything for you as far as that. So,
Mm-hmm.
if
So
you're
show
just
your
going,
worth, essentially, is what you're saying. Show
show your
show
worth.
your worth above and beyond just showing up and seeing patients. Show why you're worth it and invested in the practice.
Exactly. And it'll even say, like, sometimes, people will put in the contract, oh, after this many years, we both agree to have a conversation and potentially make you partner. And sometimes the verbiage is that actually says, consistently exceeds the expectations of the practice. So that's what they'll put in the contract to even say, oh, well, we're not even going to talk to you until you exceed our expectations like time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
So I think like a fair number of years, it's really hard to say. Like I offered my associate partnership 2 years in, but he was amazing and he took so much off of my plate and gave me such a a better quality of life that I was like, I don't care what it takes. I don't want to lose you. I want to make you partner because my life is so much better with you being involved in this practice. And
Mm-hmm.
if you're that associate that's doing that for the owner, the owner eventually is going to feel that way, like, oh, I can't let this person go, they're just so valuable.
Yeah. Do you think that they should tell the owner from day one, like, hey, I'm interested in partnership? Or is it better just to kind of keep your head down and show that you're busting your butt and worth
Yeah,
it?
I think it's always better to be honest because you have to have that conversation when you're negotiating your contract. Like when I first joined that other guy, he originally was like, I'm not looking for a partner at all. And I was
Mm-hmm.
fine with it because I never really wanted to own my own practice. I was really into research. I was really academic. I'm like, I just want to come in, see the patients, do the surgery, do my research, and go home. But obviously, it didn't wind up that way.
Right.
Um, but yeah.
What's the ideal number of offices? Because every time you grow, you're stretched a little bit thinner. What's the ideal number of offices that, let's say, that you would want to be in charge of?
That's a good question. I don't really want to put a limit on it because I just always want to grow more and more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it does get hard when you add more and more locations. And we have meetings in a central location every week, so all the managers can communicate and trade off supplies.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of organization. Google Docs are our best friend.
Yeah.
But like to me, I'd love to have between 6 to 10 offices by the time I retire.
Okay. That sounds like a lot of work. Get ready. Let's talk about marketing for a minute. So in private practice, just for any of the younger people listening, marketing is the lifeblood of patient volumes. Patients will not come to you unless they know you exist. Just like a new restaurant or a new boutique clothing shop, don't care what it is. People will not walk in the door unless they know you exist. So marketing is a very important part, even for some of the biggest groups or hospital groups. They will continue to advertise and push and promote. What do you think is the best mechanism for marketing from a private practice standpoint? Examples being billboards, newspaper ads, postcard flyers, Google ads, or Facebook ads or something. What do you think is the best?
I would say two. And the reason why I know is because we very closely track our marketing. We find out exactly where each new patient comes from. So if you're in private practice, you should definitely do that, especially if you're spending money on marketing. You want to find your ROI and customer acquisition cost and do all those calculations. But top two is internet, so Google. SEO, generic searches. So that's when you type in something like podiatrist near me and my website shows up in the organic column, right? Or podiatrist near me and I show up as an ad, like, Brucato foot and ankle surgery on the side. So Google, internet primarily is one of the best ones. People they don't look through the yellow pages anymore to find their doctors. Like they're gonna go. If you're looking for a doctor, where are you gonna go? You're gonna go Google it, right? You're gonna look online.
Right.
The second one is grassroots marketing, and what I mean by that is going out in the community, getting involved, also making contacts with referring doctors, and like referring doctors can be so powerful for you, and just talking to them, getting to know them. If you see their patient, calling them up, pick up the phone and have a conversation like, hey, this patient has severe edema, their venous stasis ulcers aren't healing, would you be okay like increasing their Lasix, or like, let's have a conversation about that. And the doctors really appreciate that. Physical therapists too. If you pick up the phone, call a physical therapist, you'll start to get reverse referrals from physical therapy, which is cool. Going out in the community and meeting, your local police officers, your teachers, your electrical workers, all the people, all the blue collar people that make it, make everything run for us. It's something that I'm passionate about because I feel like, these people are the ones like making our community as good as it is. And we need to like give back and make sure they have good foot and ankle care. So, in doing marketing that you're actually passionate about is important. So maybe that might not strike a chord with other people like it does with me. Maybe you're an ultra marathon runner and you want to, market to other marathon runners, or you're a bodybuilder and you want to go in your gym and talk to bodybuilders about how how the mechanics of the foot and ankle are important. So yeah, but if you're just looking for, bang for your buck, I think that the internet is the best.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on both of those things. I see people wasting their time on a lot of things. One thing, I've talked about this before, but one thing I think people waste a lot of time on is Instagram posts to their existing followers. It drives me absolutely bananas.
Me too.
When people do these advertising posts to their followers. I don't think they understand what's going on. That tells me that they have no idea who they're talking to, because the people that follow you already know about you. If they have a problem, they already follow you. They're aware of you. They will come see you. You are not marketing to any new people. And most of the people you are talking to are halfway across the country and have no desire to come to your office.
Right.
It drives me absolutely bananas. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I'm right there with you. Like, I hate that cookie cutter content that's like, plantar fasciitis is heel pain, and
Right.
if you have heel pain, call today. And like, people think they're like doing so great making these posts. I have a call to action in here, and it's like, no one's gonna call you.
Yeah.
No one's gonna have heel pain and be like, oh, actually, I just found this ad at the same time.
Right.
Who had it really down though? Lapiplasty. They haven't been advertising so much lately. I think maybe they got in trouble or something, but like, the patients would come in and be like, I had a bunion and a Lapiplasty ad came up while I was playing my video game, and I just came and I did the locator and I found you. And that really did work, but I think they were specifically marketing to those people with bunion stuff. But yeah, if you have an Instagram with followers, like, stop making the generic posts, stop using the the stock pictures. It's like embarrassing. I totally agree with you. Or like even the blogs, like all of my blogs, we have written ourselves. I've never paid someone else to write a blog, because you can tell when it's some college student writing, just grabbing some random info off the internet. Like, write your own blogs. Just take the time, hire someone in your practice. Like one of my medical assistants that's going to PA school, he writes a lot of them now about all the sports stuff. So, I totally agree with you on that.
I appreciate their effort. So I wish they could use all that gusto and effort and focus it in another direction. It's just, I don't think they fully understand who they're talking to, and they're missing the mark completely on marketing. So I completely agree with you. Google ads, Facebook ads. Facebook to me is more about brand awareness. People don't go to Facebook and search, I need a foot doctor. But if you put marketing in there as they're scrolling, something like you need to have 6 or 7 different pinpoint markers of getting your brand before people will have a call to action. So the more that they see your name as they're scrolling, because that's obviously location based, you can get on there and select, okay, within 10 miles of this location, I want to show it to these people. And it gets a little bit scary because you can start talking, oh, I want people who are runners. I want people who are above this median income. I want people who like all these things. And you're like, wow, that gets a little scary in a hurry, how much it knows and how targeted you can get on the ads. I don't think people realize when they type all that stuff into Facebook that they're just using that to be able to target all the ads that reach you. But then Google, obviously SEO based Google location based ads I found are very helpful, are very beneficial. There's a good return on your investment. Depends on how much you're paying cost per click, but it doesn't, one click turns into one patient, which turns into one visit or one surgery or one injection. It's, you paid $1 or $2 for that click. It's definitely worth it down the road. So completely agree with you on your internet, and word of mouth is the other thing that I think is so very important. I don't think people spend enough time going out into the community and making themselves known because it feels a little intimidating. It's a little bit like, well, you have to leave, you have to go, you have to get in your car, you have to show up, and you have to be vulnerable. You have to be a little uncomfortable and be like, hi, can I speak to such and such? And whenever I've done that in the past, they've been so nice and so, oh yeah, sure, come on in. Oh, what's your name again? Oh, come on in. And
But
it's
you're
just
also in
such a,
Iowa, aren't you?
well, yeah, true.
People
Maybe it's
are
different in
nicer in
New
Iowa.
Jersey. They don't throw something at me here like they might in New Jersey.
Exactly.
So let's talk about Boards Blast for a minute. So you are one of the I don't know what you want to say, CEOs,
Founders.
co-creators,
Yeah,
founders, sure,
founders.
of Boards Blast. So anybody listening who doesn't know what Boards Blast is, give a little rundown of what that is.
Sure. So we are a boards preparation course to get board qualified by ABFAS. And what it is it's a live 9-hour course we teach through Zoom, and it's for teachers. We're all educators and leaders in the field, and we go through each topic really quick, kind of review lectures, 10 to 15 minutes, and we teach you the strategy of taking the test. In the afternoon, after we do all that, we do breakout rooms. So it's usually a bunch of breakout rooms where we test each individual and have a conversation about it. One of the lowest forms of learning is lecturing. One of the highest forms of learning is discussion. And when you talk about something and you say it out loud, it actually commits it to your memory much clearer. So we do that. And along with that, you get access to a CBPS question bank, a didactic question bank, and we also do another Q&A, a live Q&A right before the test, like a couple days before the test. So if any questions have come up while you're studying or you're using the practice questions, we review all that with everyone and we let everyone talk about it again. With our live course, we usually have almost 100% passing rate. We also offer a recorded version. The passing rate's not as great, but it's probably because the live participants, we make you turn your camera on. We know that you're participating. Whereas if you have recorded, I know if it was me back in the day, I would just be zooming through and just skipping to sections that I want. So if you want any more information, we do have a website, boardsblast.com. And, we love supporting the younger generation. We want everyone that wants to be board certified to be board certified, and it's just going to strengthen our field.
So what year are I should know, my wife teaches at the school and I should know all these things. What year are the people that are trying to pass the board's qualified test?
So it is now your 3rd year of residency. So when I was a resident, you would take an in-training exam every year and it didn't count for anything. And then once you got out, you took the board qualification test.
Yes.
So now if you take your in-training exam in your 3rd year and you pass it, that counts as your qualification.
Okay.
So it actually saves you a lot of money if you pass while your program's paying for it.
Sure. Okay. And then they're board qualified, and then you do all the, up to 7 years case collection and submission and all that stuff. So that's a whole different ballgame. But this is for people that are getting board qualified towards the end of residency.
You got
it. Let's see. I was going to go back and talk to you a little bit about, you're the chair of the ACFAS Practice Management Committee. What role does that committee serve? What kind of things do you do in that committee?
So our primary focus is educating the members and providing resources for the members on practice management. So we put out a ton of content that is pertinent to any practitioner, any foot and ankle surgeon. So we do hub lectures. So hub lectures are like little mini lectures at the ASC for ACFAS. We put out podcasts, usually between 2 or 3 podcasts every year. We also we do webinars. So we usually have a webinar series every fall that talks about different topics. And we usually have 3 topics that are kind of related to each other. So we're really just pumping out a lot of information. And a lot of times we also get members that email the committee just to ask like, hey, what do I do for this? Or like, how do I get to be a DME supplier or something like that? So we just serve as a resource for the college.
Sure. And I've heard you on quite a few of the ACFAS podcasts. How'd you get involved with doing some of the podcasts?
So years ago, so this is actually funny. Years ago, when I was on the research committee, ACFAS does these clinical consensus panels. So they pick like a group of experts, whatever that means, but to come together and pick a bunch of statements about something. I was on the one about Achilles tendon ruptures, and then each statement about it, you have to vote on it and see if you agree and things like that. And basically the goal is you make a paper that has like all these clinical consensus statements about like what a bunch of people agreed on. So when I was doing that, I got to meet Amber Shane. That was the first time I ever met her, and we got to work together on that. And she was like, hey, I'm doing this podcast, at ASC in a couple weeks. Like, do you mind being on it? And, I was like, oh my gosh, like, yes, I'd love to do this or whatever. Like, I was so excited. And then I showed up with a whole stack of articles, like in a little outline for myself. And I was with like her and I think Chris Reeves and someone else like much more senior than me. And they just looked at me like, okay, like, and I felt like such a nerd. And then she was like, eventually you're not going to want to do these anymore. And not that I've gotten to that point, but I can see where she's saying like, I have said no to like some podcasts because I'll be doing like 3 or 4 a year, and I'm like, I can't do all this. It's just like too much time. So, so yeah, that was kind of embarrassing, but,
Podcast taking up too much time. I don't know what that's like.
Yeah, you're probably the king of that.
Yeah, the ACFAS podcasts are really good because I think they provide, like you said, they're kind of. I did one on contracts with Chris Hood, and I've heard you on some of those, and practice management and all those, and I think they're really helpful for people because they touch on a lot of different topics. They do a pretty good job of creating a good variety of different topics, and some of them are clinical, some of them are more kind of broad-based and generalized, but yeah, I think they're very helpful for people.
Yeah, actually, I just taught a ankle fracture workshop, and in preparation for that, I listened to some of the podcasts from ACFAS On Demand, and actually, I believe it's AOFAS. Some orthopedic counterpart, they have their own. I don't know if you've ever listened to any of those. It's like with Manish Kadakia and stuff, and so those are pretty good too. But I have to say, ours was a little less biased. It's really more of what their actual like opinions are based on evidence versus these orthopods kind of talking about like, oh, you should fix the AITFL every time. And it's like, okay, is it because you work for that company that has the system for that? Or is it because you actually believe that? So it's interesting. They have like a lot of other views, like, not in juxtaposition to ours, but I think we do a better job, honestly, from what I've heard.
Yeah, they're very good. I listen to all those. I've had Nick Strasser is one of the podcast hosts over there, and I've had him on the podcast, and he's fantastic. So some of those are great, and ACFAS is great too. I think you brought up an interesting topic that I think will be interesting to talk about because I get all worked up and I hate it. It's when people post a case or have an opinion and they don't tell you. So this is talking about online, and they don't tell you that they have a financial investment in the product or in the company or in the outcome of whatever is going on here. And it drives me absolutely bonkers because I do enough research that I know who's involved in what. but it absolutely drives me crazy when people post case after case after case, and I know that they're getting paid by a company to promote that specific device, or they're an investor, or they're an owner, or whatever. It drives me absolutely nuts. Does that bother you as much as it does me?
Yeah, definitely. I'm really like sensitive to that. I think a lot of the stuff that has come about as popular procedures has been industry driven,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's important to recognize that versus like, what's the latest and greatest, and like, maybe your like podiatry hero is posting all these procedures, but like you said, you don't know that they're like, a co-owner of that company, or they have
Right.
they own some of the property rights of it. So I think that should totally be disclosed, and
Yeah.
they're not going to be disclosed, and that's kind of why it's on us as individuals to do your research like you have, and find out who's really involved, and who's on whose payroll, and all that stuff, because at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for the patient, and not what just like some guy's telling you on a podcast.
Yeah. I don't have necessarily an issue with people being paid by industry. That's not necessarily my issue. Um, but yes, I 100%, you and I are on the same page. It's mostly when they don't disclose it on their cases that they're posting online. If you want to be paid by that company to design whatever, that's fine. But it would actually give you a little bit more credence. You'd be a little bit more trustworthy if you were like, hey, just so you know, I invented this. That's why I'm so passionate about it. But it's like you left that part out, and you're not telling us that you're getting paid on this end and that end when you're promoting all these cases. It drives me nuts. And sometimes I respond to people on LinkedIn and I give an opinion, and then I put at the bottom, my opinion is not swayed by industry at all or something. I have no financial disclosures for this opinion, and kind of poke the bear a little bit. But yeah, it drives me nuts when people do that. So because you brought up the industry involvement, I think that's a slippery slope with medicine, right? Because there's so much money. We were at ACFAS. We see how much money gets dumped into the industry side of things. And at the end of the day, we need the industry to be involved and to care about foot and ankle. I think it's one of the fastest growing segments in the entire world, or at least in the US, is the foot and ankle industry. But they're spending tons and tons of money, and it's starting to infiltrate into the everyday life. And I think we got to be a little bit careful.
I totally agree.
Let's see. Do you think that the ACFAS conference is worth going to?
1,000,000%. Because, if you want to learn about evidence based, what you should do, what's the new literature coming out, what's the new evidence, it has all lectures on that. You want to learn about complications, there's a ton of complications presented. Even if you're like, what, I don't care about the science stuff, and you just want to go to lectures in the hub is filled with stuff that you can just use in your everyday life. Like there's a financial planning one this year. We do a contracts one sometimes. You can do all that. If you still don't want to do any of that, you could do a workshop. You could do an ultrasound workshop. That's really helpful. You want to brush up on your ultrasound skills. You can network with your colleagues. It's a great chance to see other foot and ankle surgeons from across the country. You can pick their brains and say, hey, what do you think about this, Jeff? Like, what do you guys do out there? And it's another good place to interact with industry. If maybe you don't know about the newest thing that they developed, and you want to learn about it and see maybe that's something that could work for your patient. So there's all pluses, no minuses.
Yes. I was trying to think of a minus. Maybe if you had like an ex-girlfriend that was also a podiatrist and you didn't want to run into them or something, but
Oh, I'm sure
um,
there's plenty of those there for
I'm
everybody.
sure there is. But yeah, no, I agree. It's a fantastic conference. I think it's fantastic and highly recommended for anyone who does not go. You are part of AO faculty. So
Mhm.
going back a little ways, everyone knows what AO is. And so we had an AO conference, or an AO course, I should say, and it went away for a while, but now it's back. Can you kind of give a very brief rundown of that and how it's back and what it is and why people should care?
So, great question. So, hopefully, like you said, hopefully everyone knows what AO is, but it's the basic principles of fractures and bone healing, and our basic principles of doing surgery. There's a lot of physics involved as well. But the idea is if you learn the basics of AO, you can apply that to any surgery that you do in the future. So you don't have to learn how to exactly do 500 different procedures. If you know the basics, you will be successful. Basically, AO teamed up with ACFAS, and they co-host this course. AO completely does all the training of the faculty and everything themselves, but it's just co-hosted with ACFAS. And it's really great. So as faculty, we actually go and learn for 2 days about how to teach people. And when you go to medical school, they're not teaching you how do you make a PowerPoint, how do you do a lecture, how do people learn? Like, I didn't know any of that. I've just been winging it all these years. So
Mm-hmm.
they teach you all the basics of that. They make you practice. It's really awesome. And then we have 2 courses. One's basic AO. So that's more like for first year residents, maybe second year residents, about like, these are the types of screws. These are the different functions of a plate. What's a neutralization plate and stuff like that. And we have, it's not just lectures, and that's really important. We have small group discussions where we talk about it, we present cases, and we go through the cases together. And I'm in a room with Mike DeGella, Mike Gentile, going through these cases with these residents. And you can imagine it's a lot of really intelligent conversations and a lot of stuff to learn from guys like that. And
Mm-hmm.
so we do the small group discussions. We do labs, hands-on, sawbones. And we also do like another lab that's like little mini stations. So it's a ton of different learning styles. It's you get all your questions answered. You get mentored while you're there. And then the advanced course is similar structure, but it's diving. Let's take it a little further. How do we fix a pediatric ankle fracture? How do we fix a pilon fracture? Stuff like that. And both courses, what's cool about it is they have lectures, like some homework to do. So you watch a lot of stuff before you go. You do homework, so you have time to think about it and process it. So by the time you come to the course, you're hopefully almost ready to discuss it there. So it's a really great learning opportunity. It's a great foundation. I can't say enough good things about it. And I've had just such a positive experience with it.
Yeah, I did it when I was a resident, and I thought it was very helpful. Very, there's a difference because I take third year students with me, and so they're a little before residency, obviously, and they don't really know much about screws. They've heard about screws, they understand the concepts of screws, but to put your hands on it, to see it, to understand it, to do it, to apply all that stuff in kind of a controlled setting like that is extremely helpful. Because yes, you'll get that in residency, but to get that in that setting, I found it very helpful and very beneficial. Does the course move around to different locations?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What the course I taught last year was in California. They're having one in a couple weeks in like Las Vegas area. There's going to be one in Baltimore in October. So it does move around to hopefully desirable locations.
Sure. We have time for a few more questions, so I'll pick one that's controversial. What do you think about women's only symposiums or conferences? Because I know you're involved in some of those. So I want to get your side of that, and then maybe I'll put a different spin on it.
Okay. I'm curious about that.
My
But
wife's a podiatrist. You have to.
yeah,
I'm not going to say
I
anything
got you.
ridiculous.
Yeah. You got the women card in your pocket on
I
that.
do.
um I think they're great. I think if you look across the board, you see all these panels that are either mostly men or all men, and there's maybe like one female lecturer. And like, ACFAS is one of the biggest culprits of this. If you went to ACFAS, you probably
Yep.
saw it. Like every panel had like one token woman on it. Like, thanks.
Yeah.
But so I think having an all women symposium where it's all women lecturing gives women who may not have had the opportunity to lecture before lecture. And
Hmm.
so, and it gives exposure as well. And, you know, I think like, no matter what we try to say, there is some discrimination against women. And it's not just, foot and ankle surgery. It's all over the world in the country. And it's just kind of where our culture is right now. And
Hmm.
in my own personal experience, and a lot of people have agreed with me, we have to be more vocal and about like our accomplishments, like, oh, like I wrote a paper on this, oh, I like I do this procedure. And we have to constantly kind of let everyone know, hey, we're like just as good as a man, if not better, because you're not paying attention to us, or you're just assuming because your brain is thinking, oh, men's a surgeon, women, are you a surgeon? I don't know. But
Mhm.
we just constantly have to like work so much harder to prove ourselves. So having an opportunity where 7 or 8 women get to lecture on complex surgery, that's awesome. I think that's great. I've also gone to like these symposiums, like sponsored by industry, and they're also good because it's all women. We're all interacting and networking with each other and building each other up. Versus if we're in a setting where there's mostly men and there's just few and far between, women don't always like come together in those situations. It's harder for us to come together. So it's I've met so many people from across the country at the women's only type symposiums, just because of that. I think it's more of a better way to connect. I think as on a personal level, I don't mind being branded as like, a strong woman, but some of my friends don't want to be branded at that. So they say no to women's only speaking opportunities. And that's fine. And I think it's because they're afraid if they get branded as like the strong woman that they're not going to be, acknowledged on a more national level with the other men, whatever that may be. So it's pretty interesting actually, the dynamics of it. But I don't know, if what's your alternative spin on it?
So I'm not a fan, but only because I agree with you, which is there should be more women integrated into every conference. I don't think that we need to segregate in any way. I think that that is good, and that is, like you said, networking, and it's fantastic, and it gives you some experience, and maybe it gives you a little bit of confidence, and so there's no real problem with it. But my problem is not necessarily with the women's symposium. My problem is that the fact that the women's symposium has to exist in the first place. Like, why does it have to exist? Why can't all of the panels just have an equal representation? My wife teaches at the school, and women now comprise more than 50% of students in podiatry school. So eventually there will be more women. So why aren't they better represented when we get to these conferences? So I don't really hate them. I just hate the idea of them because it means that you have to do it in the first place, which means something's wrong. Something isn't going correctly, and that there should be more integration on a national level, and that they shouldn't even have to exist. That's my take on it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. There's one company, I won't say what company it is, but they don't really do a lot of women's stuff. And when I asked them about that, they said that they kind of put it to like ACFAS board and AOFAS board and say like, hey, like we want you to have more women on the boards. Like we want to see more women on the top. And if you don't do it, we're going to pull back on our sponsorship. We're going to pull back on our funding. Which,
Mm.
if that's true, I never confirmed if that was true or not. Like that's amazing, because that's what we need. We need proper representation. That paper came out probably in 2021 at this point with Butterworth, Jennings, all the women that just said, you know women don't have as many powerful positions in academics, in residency directors, whatever, all this stuff that kind of just was like the proof that there's discrimination going on. And what was funny about that is like no one really did anything about it. I thought
Mm-hmm.
ACFAS was going to like, okay, let's make a task force and really get women on the same, like, let's like integrate the women appropriately. You don't want to give people opportunities that they're not necessarily qualified for. That's not what I'm saying.
Sure.
But let's take an extra look at women that apply to be faculty or whatever it is, or like look at the women doing research, because there's women doing research just like there is men. So but they never really did, like, so there's DEI, but is there DEI? So, and I agree. And I think, when I was in school, we were 50 women, 50% women, 50% men. But there's a lot of women that I graduated with that don't do surgery anymore, or they don't even practice anymore. And that's not their fault, and that's their choice, obviously. But I think it's just how society is. Women, there's studies that show that we pick up more of the, house chores, taking care of the kids, doing all the chores. And I think when you have a really demanding, stressful job like we have, and then you add it on top of all the home stuff, it's just too much for people. It's like, you can't keep doing it. So I get that. But I do think there's way more women that are much more qualified than men. That you see the same men over and over and over again, and let's mix it up. What would be the harm in that?
Mm-hmm.
What's the downside on that?
Yeah, I completely agree with mixing it up. So, probably ruffle some feathers, but yeah, I think mixing it up, getting some new faces in there, some new blood. It's just when you look at the face of podiatry, at least when I look at the classes, the younger people, there is a lot more diversity of race and ethnic creed, all the stuff. It's just like a wide swath of humanity, which is fantastic. But you don't necessarily see that represented when you get on the when you go to the lecture panels. So I think that will change eventually. But I have kind of a issue with the women's panels, because why not? If those people are good enough for there, well, let's just put them over here and let's just make it all be one, and let's all just kind of learn from each other. The applicant pool in podiatry is decreasing, which leads to poor quality students, residents, and eventual attendings. What do you think the role, because you do play a role in ACFAS, and you're not gonna change the world with a flip of a switch. I don't think any of us are. But what do you think we can do as a profession to kind of increase the applicant pool, not necessarily increase the number of spots and all that stuff, but just get better quality applicants and get the word out? That's one of the reasons I started this podcast, was trying to spread the word. But what do you think we can do as a profession?
I think like the people that are doing really well, that are like really happy and successful, whatever you define it as, making a good living, owning a bunch of practices, publishing a bunch of papers, their assistant dean at the school, their head of the hospital. There's a lot of podiatrists that are like president of the hospital staff now and things I think we need to like highlight those people and kind of go to the undergrads, like the pre-medical students, and just say, hey, look, like this is podiatry. This is what we're doing. We're doing most of the foot and ankle surgery in the country. Like why don't more people know about that? And just kind of offer it as like I don't want to say an alternative route, but I think a lot of people are like, I want to go to PA school because it's only 2 years, and I could do it. There's a lot of flexibility and I can still make a good job. But at our end though, like it's like, okay, you can own your own practice if you want to. You can see your own patients. You're not working under a doctor technically. So I think there's a lot, we kind of have to almost like figure out what the weak points of those like NPPA programs are, and kind of show what's great about us. And there's so many different things, the specialization alone, you're not going to do that as a PA or NP. Like, we're the best at the foot and ankle, and we start learning that from day one. And personally, I'd rather be the expert on one part of the body versus like trying to be a jack of all trades. So stuff like that, I think just like saying like, hey, like this is a really good route for you. I actually did like a student recruitment event. Did you talk to any of the students at ACFAS? They had some undergrad students there.
I did not talk to undergrads. I talked to quite a few existing students.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool. They actually had some undergrad students like have a track in ACFAS to like learn about podiatry, which was like I thought was a really good idea. And like I was one of the people that talked to them, and I said like you'll hear people say like, oh, private practice is dying, and it is not. Like it is absolutely thriving. You can make a great living owning your own business in this field, and it's an awesome feeling, and you can be really successful. So I think that's one. I think another one might be like maybe trying to work on more scholarships for the schools, because that was one of the things that really brought me into my schools. Like I was really interested in podiatry, and I really liked it. But as soon as they gave me a scholarship, I was like, I'm done. I'm going there. So I think maybe trying to obtain some industry money to sponsor more scholarships to try to attract that the more talented applicant would be helpful as well.
I agree with you about the undergrads, because I think the biggest problem with podiatry is awareness. And everyone knows about dental school. Everyone knows about veterinary. Everyone knows about MD. And I guess most people know about DO. but there's not a lot of awareness about podiatry, that it's its own thing. I think people are aware of it, but they don't realize that it's its own thing. So my wife and I have been volunteering and going to the University of Iowa, and we're doing a surgical skills lab with about 30 people. And if half of them are interested, that's going to fill a big chunk of a class someday. So, that's just us at one undergrad institution. I think if people took some time to go locally to their own undergrad or whatever undergrad is near them, or high school is a little tough. Those kids are a little bit too early, but undergrad, pre-med, any of those people, I think that's a great place to start. But it involves people actually doing it, leaving, showing up, and going out and
all that same stuff. I went to St. Joe's in Philadelphia, and I go back every year and I give a lecture on the pathophysiology of diabetic neuropathy. And the entire time I'm promoting podiatry. I'm like, look at this cool external fixator I use. Look at all these people you can help. Like, come shadow me in my office. And so like, why isn't everyone doing that? Like you said, you do have to like make the effort and go show up and blah, blah, blah. But I like the idea of the surgical skills lab. That's actually really great. I might steal that. That's cool.
It's obviously boosted by industry because they're the ones that are going to bring all the stuff, but it is kind of mutually beneficial for everyone. So
yeah. So like, why wouldn't like ACFAS or like APMA allot a certain chunk of money for the organization to go out and do that?
I mean, I think they do some of those things, but I just don't know how much of that stuff lands. I just don't know. I'm not saying it's zero. I'm just saying I don't know how much of that stuff lands.
They have that campaign.
Feet on the street.
About like getting people to know about podiatry and stuff.
It's it's just kind of word of mouth. I mean, it's just a little bit like a little bit here and a little bit there may make a big difference eventually.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I want to thank you for hopping on the podcast with me tonight. I think this has been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that want to check out Boards Blast, go to boardsblast.com. You're also on Instagram. If you want to tell people your Instagram handle.
Sure. It's actually, I don't remember. It's Dr. Brucato.
Dr. Brucato. It is. So reach out if you have any questions or check out boardsblast.com. And thank you so much for joining me. Thanks, everybody, for joining me on this episode of Paw Patrol with your host, Dr. Jeff Dikis. We'll see you guys next time.
Disclaimer. Opinions expressed are those of the content creators and do not represent any employer or entity. The information shared is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice or used in any legal capacity, including establishing standards of care. All efforts have been made to comply with HIPAA regulations. No guarantees are made regarding the accuracy of statements or opinions provided. Interaction with the podcast does not establish a doctor-patient relationship. Please enjoy this podcast responsibly.